Salmon fishing is my summer recreation. I fish with a big, fat, juicy worm. I put the head of the worm on the point of the hook and thread it all the way around the hook and up the line, and then leave the tail of the worm just hanging nice and juicily and tastily. And you can't see the hook at all. The bait that's put into the water is 95% worm and 5% hook. It may even only be 1% hook. If the salmon exercised the gift of discernment and tested the worm before it swallowed it, it would not get deceived into taking the hook into its mouth. But it takes the hook in because it swallows the truth. The truth becomes the cover for the deception. And people see there's a lot of truth and think, oh, this must be good. But because they don't test all things, then they get led into deception. The reason why salmon gets into my freezer every year is because they lack discernment. Satan wants us to finish up in his freezer and freeze you out of any activity. 1 Corinthians chapter 12 and verse 10 talks about the different gifts of the Spirit, and one of them is the gift of discerning of spirits. Now, there are 3 different types of spirit which should be learned to discern. The first is Holy Spirit, God. What is God doing? We need to just really sense the presence of God, sense what he is doing in the situation. Then there's the human spirit. What is the human spirit doing in a person's life or in your own life? And then what's the enemy doing? And how is he influencing either our lives or somebody else's? You might have a whole pot of food, and I come along and I drop one tiny drop of arsenic. It's probably about 0.00001%. If you knew there was that small amount of arsenic in there, would you say, oh no, there's not much arsenic there, it's not going to worry me? You know jolly well that that tiny drop of arsenic is going to make you really quite ill. Arsenic's a poison. Truth is our ultimate defense against the enemy. A small amount of deception can have a catastrophic effect eventually on the rest of our lives. We've got to test all things. Why do we need to test all things? The enemy comes dressed up to look like the real thing. And so we need to test those things that look like the real thing to see whether they really are what they seem to be. Now, that's 1 Thessalonians 5:21. It says, test all things. Now, what does the word all mean? It means all. Having tested and proven it, you can then trust in what you have tested. One of the deceptions about deceptions is truth is actually a vehicle for deception. Instead of the church being salt and light in the world has been poison in the church. You don't need to test the bad, it's the good that you need to test. 1 Timothy 4:16, he just says in 2 things. Watch your life, that's the way you live, and watch your doctrine, that's what you believe and what you teach. Those 2 things need to be guarded in our lives. Guard them closely, and he says persevere in them. Why do you need to persevere in them? Because there's resistance from the enemy. You only need to persevere in those things where there's opposition.